Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro is following the Donald Trump script to a T. Now, you know, we kind of saw this movie before 80 years ago. You had Mussolini, essentially inventing fascism. And he had the black shirts, his private, this was a private militia. It was sort of like the Proud Boys of Italy. They were volunteers. They weren't official. They weren't the government. They weren't, and they took over a town, and then they took over a state, and then they marched on Rome and backed down the king, King Herbert or something like that. I'm forgetting his name now. And he said, okay, you can run the country. And Mussolini became, Il Duce. He became the prime minister of Italy and took over the country. And then that model became the model that, and this was in the 20s. This started in 1922. And that was the model that Adolf Hitler used, Hitler who was arrested in the late 20s in Germany when he tried to overthrow the government of Bavaria. He tried to do essentially the same thing and overthrow the government of Bavaria, and he failed. He was arrested. And they put him in prison for a year and a half, which is where he wrote Mein Kampf and developed this relationship with Rudolf Hess, and who was kind of his co-author on that, and et cetera. And then of course, the same thing happened in Spain. So, one guy figures out the formula for taking over countries and basically stealing democracy away from them. And then other guys imitate that. Well, that's what's going on right now in Brazil. Bolsonaro is complaining. Well, first of all, it's also happening in Peru right now, and it's happening in Germany. This group tried to do it in Germany. They were planning on overthrowing the government of Germany. Now, the Germans, they don't put up with this crap. They arrested these people. They raided all these houses. They took 25 people into custody. They're in prison. They're facing serious charges of conspiring to overthrow the government. Now, but down in Brazil, what Bolsonaro has done, he lost by 2.1 million votes. That's a landslide loss. And Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is now on January 1st will be the new Brazilian president. But the followers of Bolsonaro think that they've got another 3 weeks to try to bring down the government and and keep Bolsonaro in office. He's the current president. This is like January 6th. This is like the last weeks of the Trump administration. Because, Trump didn't leave the White House until January 20th. That's the day that we install the new president every year, or every 4 years. And now Bolsonaro's followers, Alan Rios, who's down there, tweeted, the center of Brasilia, this is the capital of Brazil, looks like a war zone. He's a reporter for Metropolis, which is a news site in Brazil. He says, torched buses and cars, destroyed buildings and signposts, rubbish bins and gas canisters littering the floor after being used as weapons. This is, I'm quoting from a piece here in commondreams.org. Political commentator Thomas Trauman described the riot as an attempt to replicate the January 6, 2021 assault on the U.S. Capitol. And why is this going on? Because Bolsonaro is now saying that the election was stolen from him, that it was rigged, that the voting machines couldn't be trusted, that, quack, quack, quack. And claiming that Brazil's voting infrastructure was vulnerable to fraud. And right on October 30th, right after he lost the election, his followers blocked hundreds of roads across the country. They are urging armed forces, the military, to intervene. They have been begging the military to keep Bolsonaro in power. Justice de Moraes fined Bolsonaro. This was a court. He was sued, fined Bolsonaro for his bad faith challenge to the election. Meanwhile, Lula's election team has sued Bolsonaro, his running mate, and two of his sons. This was just on Tuesday, for attacking, a week ago Tuesday, for attacking that country's voting system and attempting to bribe voters. The next day, that was when Bolsonaro came out and said to his followers, the fate of the country and my fate is in your hands. In other words, go out and burn the place down. Reuters reported yesterday, quote, hundreds of Bolsonaro supporters gathered outside the presidential residence on Monday afternoon with banners calling for military intervention. President Bolsonaro joined them for a public prayer. Keep an eye on this. There are also concerns about the physical safety of Lula and his vice president-elect, Geraldo Alckmin. So, you know, what stays, what happens in the United States doesn't necessarily stay in the United States.